Chapter 17, Clients with a Problem. American Home Products bought the Vaness Laboratories in 1930. Standing in a dark corner among its many products was one called Anacin, an aspirin-like product. Anacin was sold in the main as an ethical product to doctors. Frank Hummert, a partner in Blackett, Sample and Hummert, and an outstanding advertising man, came up with an idea. He said, "Here is a great product. We can build it on the simple thought that Anacin is like a doctor's prescription. Like a doctor's prescription, it contains not one ingredient but four. We can sell it for all aches, with emphasis on headaches." American Home took that idea and held to it tenaciously. In 1940, Mr. William Laporte joined the company and helped build Anacin, to by far the biggest selling product of its kind. It is interesting that although American Home had bought a company which made many products, Anacin, because of a great advertising idea, became the big one in the end. American Home has stayed with this one idea for more than 30 years. There is controlled impatience. You can improve it, you can work around it, but stay with it. Stay where Frank Hummert put it, and keep it alive as you move. Later, the Biow company handled Anacin from print to TV. But we always held to the one idea. Like a doctor's prescription. We improved the presentation. We kept the sales moving up, but we never changed that slogan. That runs counter to the ordinary agency's prescription, which is, throw out the old agency's idea, even if it is a good one. We must prove ourselves. Sometimes proving yourself means having the confidence to let well enough alone. As this book is being written, we find Anacin trying a new idea, but with controlled impatience, never forgetting the old one. With great impact, they say, the big difference in the way you feel is the big difference in Anacin. This looks like a wonderful idea to me. It moves on the old theory I've mentioned before. Don't tell people how good you make your product. Tell them how good your product makes them. Anacin is doing just that now, and I'll bet it's a winner. When Samuel Gompers opened an office in Washington for his American Federation of Labor, people asked, "Now that you're here in Washington, what do you expect to get for labor?" Mr. Gompers answered, "I can't tell you exactly what I'll get, but one thing I can tell you, I'll get more." William Laporte, president of American Home Products, is that kind of man. He's a master at getting more. More from the men who work for him. More from the products themselves. More from the money put into advertising. More. Procter & Gamble was very much interested in finding a way to establish themselves in daytime television. Mr. A.N. Halverstad of P&G had written to all their agencies, asking them to think about it and come up with ideas. This request was meet to Roy Windsor, television director of the Biow company. He had worked with soap opera on radio for years and knew all the techniques that were needed. And he knew something else, that a single soap opera would not work. You had to have continuity, enough shows following one another for at least 3/4 of an hour every day, so that the public would get the habit of listening in. To do this, we would have to get a network that would take soap opera, and we would have to have another sponsor. Windsor put on his hat and went to see Mr. Laporte. "We'll let him tell the story." "Wouldn't it be great," I said to Mr. Laporte, "if we could get the network to put 3 or 4 of these soap operas together, one following the other? That would build up the habit of tuning in. It would give you a lot more for your money." When you say a thing like that to Mr. Laporte, he never asks you if you can get it. He just wants to know when. He promptly ordered 1/4 hour a day, 5 times a week. I came out of his office wondering why I talked so much. When I went to NBC, they promptly turned me down. I had asked for a block of soap operas, 3 or 4 together. If need be, sustaining shows to go along with ours. They gave me a resounding no. They wanted no part of soap opera on television, and certainly would contribute no free time on the air. But as quickly as they said no, Columbia said yes. They were going to put a 1/4 hour on at their own expense and follow that with a show for American Home, and another one for Procter & Gamble. We had our 45-minute block. An interesting corollary to this story is that CBS, which said yes then, became #1 in daytime television, and has remained #1 to this day just because they saw a good idea and grabbed it. A long time ago when we were young and green, we handled a product called La Gerardine. It was a liquid you put on your hair that made it curl, or so they said. And curling, of course, was what women wanted. To put this unknown product on the air with top-flight talent would be a 10 strike. To put it on with talent that especially appealed to women but wouldn't make men tune out would be even better. I hit on the idea of using Walter Winchell. No one else would do. Winchell was, at the time, the hottest personality around. He was syndicated nationally in newspapers. His behind-the-scenes gossip fascinated millions of readers. What Winchell said was quoted everywhere. And we wanted him. This was before TV. Winchell had been broadcasting only on local radio stations. Winchell on a national radio hookup would have real news value all across the country. And news value was what we needed. I got Water Winchell. I gave him a year's contract for Le Girardin, cancelable in 13 weeks. We expected success. But even we were surprised at the speed with which the product began to move. Then suddenly sales started to go downhill. Sales stopped for a simple reason, one we might have known in the first place and probably would have if we were women. La Girardin curling lotion did not curl. A new advertising problem. Obviously, the more we sold, the more word got around and the fewer customers we had left. Sales kept sliding faster and faster. This was word of mouth, but who needed it? We were faced with a complete, unadulterated fizzle. There was only one thing to do: cancel. And we had just 3 weeks left to do it. The prospect of giving up this valuable property really hurt. But we couldn't find another client to take up Winchell's contract. Or any part of it. Then suddenly, out of the blue, George Washington Hill, president of the American Tobacco Company and one of the great advertising men of his day, asked to see me. His idea was straightforward. He recognized the power of Walter Winchell and wanted him for Lucky Strike. Mr. Hill said he would pay handsomely if we could persuade our client to release the Winchell contract to him. George Washington Hill was a tough man. Who would want to cross him? We set our price high. Finally, we both got what we wanted. Mr. Hill got Winchell, and he gave me a substantial check made out at our suggestion to La Girardin, which we turned over to them in full. A short while afterward, Sheldon Coons, then Merchandising Council of American Tobacco, had lunch with me. He said, "Mr. Hill wants to thank you for what you have done. Will you please take this check as proof of his appreciation?" When later I told this to my client, he thought that was the cream on the milk. And that ended an episode that was enough to curl your hair. P.S. I am still wondering if Mr. Hill ever found out how much he could have saved had he waited just 3 weeks. Whether he did or not, he was very happy with his bargain. Winchell advertised Lucky's for years, a top show on the air. But I've always felt a little guilty about not telling Hill all the facts. I have to lay it to my youthful zealousness to get the most from my client. Or more likely, to show him how able I was. All this big talk about big deals is fine. But I remember when the Biow company landed its first truly national account. It was an odd situation. The Hoyt agency had solicited the account of S. Glemby Sons, a company that sold Lorraine hairnets exclusively to Woolworth. Hoyt was to deliver its ideas in 2 weeks, and following the custom of charging a prospect for the presentation of ideas, was to be paid $1,000. Against this background, I came in. After listening attentively to me, Glemmy said they would like to work with us. They were impressed with our enthusiasm and our approach. However, since they had signed the contract for the submission of Hoyt's ideas, they were already out that $1,000. I said to Harry Glemby, "I'll tell you what I'll do. You come to my office tomorrow morning, I'll submit to you a number of ideas we have in mind to carry your business forward. If you agree with them and want us to proceed, say so, and we'll give you back the $1,000 that you guaranteed Hoyt. By this you will accomplish 2 things. You will have the agency you want, and you will gain 2 weeks in getting started." Mr. Glemby thought this was just fine. He had nothing to lose. He would come up the next morning with 3 of his people and listen to our presentation. There was only one thing wrong with my idea, I thought, as I was leaving his office. I had nothing ready for the presentation. I got back to my office and ordered one thing, an ordinary window shade. It would be fastened to the bottom of a partition and unrolled upward as we presented our ideas. The advantage of the window shade was that we could unroll it as we discussed each idea in turn. Nobody looking at it could move faster than we wanted him to. The pull on the cord kept their eyes on the ball. So far, all we had was a window shade and 24 hours. Then we started. Next day, the Glemby people came up to my office, 4 of them in all. I had the nervous job of presenting the ideas. Another man was in charge of the cord. We started to work, augmenting the ideas as they came up the roll. All Glemby advertising had to be done over the Woolworth name, since Lorraine hairnets were sold only through their stores. But Glemby had never run a line. We recommended full-color pages in leading publications. Equally important were window displays, counter displays, space allocations, and merchandising ideas. We recommended flooding Woolworth with a barrage of ideas, knowing most of them would end up in the ash can. The point was to keep Woolworth constantly Lorraine conscious. No matter how few of the ideas they actually adopted, Lorraine would benefit. It was bound to be more actively promoted. It took over an hour to tell the whole story. Glemby bought it, all of it. They were ready to start immediately. Happily, I marched to our bookkeeping office, got a check for $1,000 made out to Mr. Glemby, and gave it to him. This took care of Hoyt, and we had our first national account. When you entered the Glemby offices, you entered a busy business that was selling Lorraine hairnets by the millions, and selling them all to Woolworth. Glemby got $7.20 a gross. Woolworth got $14.40, a good return on their money and good value to the customers. In the Glemby organization, there was one major salesman, Harry Glemby. He could sell so magnificently that you could sit next to him in the tightest situation and never be a bit apprehensive. You knew perfectly well that no matter how far he was from what you believed necessary to clinch the sale, one way or another he would come around to it and drive it home. It seemed to me he never missed. He had the unique ability not only to sell Woolworth his goods, but to make them actually feel a sense of responsibility to him to keep selling more of them. It was an education to watch him in operation. I remember once when Harry went down to see Woolworth before he left for Europe. I was with him. He told them what they had sold the last year, what he expected them to sell this year, and that he was going to Europe with the hope that they would accomplish this objective. Somehow or other, they always went along with him, and this occasion was no different. Before you knew it, they were urging him to go off to Europe and have a good time and not to worry. They would do everything within reason to help meet their new objective, and they did. While he was gone, something unexpected happened. Woolworth informed Glemby that they had been offered hairnets at a fraction of what they were paying our client. As far as anyone could see, the nets were exactly the same, equal in size, equal in quality, but distinctly unequal in price. They wanted to know what we planned to do about it. Planned? This put the company in a turmoil. Harry Glemby, the potent persuader, was abroad. The men left in New York were not salesmen, and they were faced with a situation that put their whole business in jeopardy. Their entire operation revolved around Woolworth. Their business was geared to that $7.20 price. To cut it would wreck their profit structure. How could they answer? We talked several times. Finally, Harry's brother Louis asked me if I would go down and see Woolworth. This was a tough assignment, but my client asked me to go, and I went. There I was, in front of the buyer who bought millions of hairnets. His business paid for a lot of advertising. If we cut the price, the advertising would go. We would lose, Glemby would lose, and actually Woolworth would lose. He started just as I thought he would. "Mr. Biow," he said, smiling, but seriously, "what are you going to do about the price?" "Mr. O'Keefe," I answered, "don't worry about that. Glemby will meet your price. Any price you've been offered. Just tell us what it is and you've got it." "That's wonderful," he said, breathing a sigh of relief. "Why didn't you tell me that before?" "Wait a minute," I said. "Don't misunderstand me. I said we would meet the price the other fellow offered you, and we will. But this other fellow didn't offer you Lorraine hairnets. He offered you hairnets with no name, no built-in value, no reputation, no sales momentum. Obviously, you will never sell anywhere near as many of his hairnets as you would of Lorraine. You will make a lot more money on Lorraine at $7.20 a gross than you would on his at any price. This must be as obvious to you as it is to us. We invest a lot of money in advertising Lorraine hairnets. This powerful advertising helps Woolworth's entire business. It brings people in to buy hairnets, and when they buy hairnets, they buy other items as well." I waited for a moment, out of breath and out of ideas. Then, "All this would end once we cut the price because we cannot afford to do both." He stared at me hard. Tell me now what hairnets you need, what price you want to pay. We'll put them up for you under any name except Lorraine. We'll meet our competitor on his own ground. More than that, we cannot do. Glenby kept on selling Lorraine hairnets at $7.20. Woolworth kept on selling them at $14.40. And when Harry Glenby got back from Europe, he presented me with a Daimler automobile. There is a sad sequel. You could not have a Daimler fixed in America. Nobody had parts to fit it. But it was a distinguished car, chauffeur-driven. I was proud of it. It gave stature to the people inside the house when it stood outside. I say stood advisedly, because that was just about all that Daimler could do. It had every gadget you could think of, including running water. The water was probably what sold the car, but it couldn't run the car, and neither could I. Finally, I turned it in for one that was made in America. One that could be fixed any place you went in America, but that hardly ever needed it. Back in the 30s, we lost the A.S. Beck Shoe Company, a large $5 shoe chain that has since grown even larger. These things will happen. We had a man with us who handled the account, and he wanted to go into business for himself. He did, and the account went with him. It didn't last long with the new agency, nor did the agency for that matter. But while they were with us, I was trying hard to get an idea that would make the windows stoppers, and at the same time sell what they had for sale. Quality shoes at a lower price. We hit on a happy idea, and we put it right in the middle of their windows. We took 5 shoes, all classic pumps. 4 of them were higher-priced shoes bought elsewhere. One was ours, selling at $5, the lowest price of all. As far as possible, the styling was identical. We put the 5 shoes on a shelf, and with a bow to President Eliot's 5-foot shelf of Harvard classics, then a most popular set of reference books, we called ours too, the 5-foot shelf. We were going to educate women on shoes. With each shelf, we had a sign. One of these shoes is ours. $5. The other 4 cost up to $20. If you can pick the Beck shoe, you get a pair free. We did not ask them to pick the best shoe on the 5-foot shelf. We asked them to pick the one that cost least. But they rarely did. Almost invariably, they picked a higher-priced shoe as the Beck. Obviously, and we made sure that the fact became more and more obvious to the public, Beck shoes looked better than shoes that cost more. Out of the 5-foot shelf came many other ideas. Ideas we could never have used if the 5 feet had been 6. Once again, showmanship at work, this time for Beck. A bank in Boston had been offering us its advertising for some time. Each time they made the offer, we courteously said no, simply because I hadn't figured out how a man in New York could advertise a bank in Boston, since banks then were largely local with largely local problems. I had had some ideas about banks for some time. Most banks seemed to me about as friendly as a mathematical equation. And as far as I could see, most of their customers felt just as I did. Every time you walked into a bank, a guard greeted you with a good morning. This man was in uniform, had a small smile on his face, and a gun on his hip. When you came in to make a deposit, you walked over to a desk, a high desk that had no chair, and then used a pen that was on a chain. When you were ready to deposit your money, the man in the cage seemed annoyed. You brought him work to do. You were bothering him. He let you know it, or you thought he did. He was behind bars, and the funny thing was that he saw you behind bars too. When you were all done with this deposit, you'd made no money on the transaction if you were a commercial account, since commercial accounts pay no interest. Out you went, free of the gun, the pen on the chain, the chairless desk, the man behind the bars. You were yourself again and happy. Out of the bank. Great business. This bothered me. All banks could be human, they could look inviting instead of like a tomb. This National Shawmut Bank of Boston had already started on just such a humanizing program. They were ready to go further with it, with all aspects of it, including advertising. Well, we took the account. The chairman of this bank, Walter S. Buckland, is highly astute and aggressive. I know no man in banking or any other business more eagerly looking for the right idea or more willing to try it. Walter Buckland is as sold on advertising as I am. He's the only man I know whom I had to urge to keep his budget down. His TV advertising alone for a year totaled $800,000. And this was just in the Boston area. Here is a man who not only has a large concept of the role of banking, but knows the importance of understanding his customers' problems. He understands the art of making his bank their bank, where they can always come as to a friend for information and help. When friendliness is the watchword of a bank, people get to know it fast. Even the colors used in the interiors of the Shamet banks were chosen with an eye to their friendliness, so they would appeal even to women. You walk into a Shamet bank and you instantly feel at ease. However, they never did do away with the man wearing a gun. I guess they felt that would be going too far. Today, friendly-looking banks are spotted around the country, but there still are many more that could take the hint. One thing that always bothered me about banks was the use of the word branch. What is a branch? Just a weak sister to the big bank. If I had my business in a neighborhood where there was a branch, I just wouldn't do business with it. I would rather go downtown, even way downtown, and meet the man who ran it. These branch men had nothing to say anyway. They always seem to have to call headquarters and find out the answer. When I enter a bank, no matter where it is, I want it to be headquarters, and do things like headquarters. The man in charge should have ability and authority. We strongly recommended that Shamet eliminate the use of the word branch, but more, that they make the men who ran each bank an authority, with as much right to say yes or no as the people downtown. Of course, a manager can talk to the men downtown when he needs to, but this should be in exceptional cases. He should be equal to the job he has and run it that way. Now, there are 31 headquarters in the National Shamet Bank. Every time you walk into one and talk to the man in charge, you talk to a man with authority. You know it, and he knows it, and he handles himself that way. It's surprising how much difference this little change made to people coming into the bank. How much more secure they felt talking over their problems with the man in charge. He was better for them than anyone else in the bank could be. He was in the neighborhood, knew what they were doing, what they wanted. He was a part of it all. Someday when you are in Boston, take a look at the National Shamet Bank. You will never find a branch, and that is important not only outside the bank, but inside too, because it affects the psychology of all the men and women who work there. Once upon a time. How refreshing to find a neighborly bank. How refreshing when you need money to carry on your business. To find a banker who knows you. How refreshing when he looks over your statement and says, "John, I am going to give you this money, although your statement doesn't really call for it. I've watched you over the years and I know you will make good." How refreshing when he says, "Come in every week or so and let me know what you are doing. Perhaps together we can help you pay back the bank." How refreshing. The year 1950 saw the start of the Korean War. As a carryover from the last war, people were afraid of scarcities and began to hoard. This, in the long run, would have been bad for business, bad for everybody. It would soon lead to scarcities, and scarcities would lead to higher prices. The very thing hoarders were trying to avoid, they themselves were inviting. We saw a chance to help the economy and help the bank. We ran a simple all-type advertisement for Shamet under the heading, "If you want to hoard, hoard money." This ad ran first in Boston. Then other banks across America, even in Hawaii, asked permission to run it. Of course, Shamet allowed them to do so. It hit right home. People understood it, liked it, it was human. And it helped to do what we wanted it to do, stop hoarding. Another time we ran an advertisement to appeal to prime customers, men with much money to deposit. An ad for rich men? No, it was headlined, "What makes a company treasurer tick?" What the copy said in effect was, "You may think of the treasurer as a mean old guy who goes around putting out lights and raising hell about long-distance calls." What a misconception. The treasurer should be loved and cherished. He's the one who makes sure that money is available to meet the bills and pay the salaries, to say nothing of the raises. Without him, you're in trouble. We ran the ad in Fortune and the Wall Street Journal to back up Shamet's national sales operation. Company treasurers loved it. They wrote in for copies and rolled out the red carpet when Shamet representatives came to solicit their business. Shamet was delighted with the results. There were many more advertisements like these. They kept the appeal of the bank fresh, the personnel pepped up and alert. People, customer people, liked the humanness of the advertising, just as they liked the new human look of the banks themselves. Though I worked for banks, I never got the hang of several banking or financial principles. I addressed a banking group a while back. They laughed when I told them, "I don't even understand a balance sheet. Every time I look at one of these statements," I said, "the assets and liabilities are the same." And that means you are even. And when you are even, you're darn near busted as far as I'm concerned. We've talked about money. Now let's discuss liquor. Nobody can say the advertising business deals in non-essentials. The Schlitz account was negotiated and a contract signed by a company officer, but without my knowledge or consent, at a time when this agency already was serving a competitive beer account. As a matter of principle and regardless of billing involved, I feel I must take this action. I have, therefore, exercised that clause in the contract, as delivered to me, giving the agency the right of cancellation. I have so notified Schlitz. This statement appeared in the newspapers in January 24 hours with a $9 million account, and we resigned. Actually, we had no choice. We were serving Ruppert, and though they spent only $2 million a year on advertising, they were our client. A difference of $7 million a year is important to any agency of any size. But there are times when an agency has an obligation it must respect, regardless of money. We had lost business before for one reason or another. Lost it after working hard to get it. But this was the one time we gave it up before we even got started. It's the old story all over again. Laws are passed by the majority for the control of the minority. If that weren't so, you'd have complete havoc. But the people of this country had their eyes closed once. The majority of them. And a national prohibition law was passed. As a matter of fact, it became an amendment to the Constitution. Liquor was out, and boy did we have fun. Ships waited outside the 3-mile limit to deliver their contraband. Cars carrying liquor crossed Canada on trains, and then were put on trucks so the liquor could be delivered in the United States. Every conceivable means of getting around the law was tried, and millions of dollars were made by the people who did. Gangster reputations and fortunes were founded on a law that made a new legal evil. Thousands of lives were lost because some men were determined and duty-bound to enforce the law while others were breaking it. Of course, the amendment had to be repealed. Again, we had a law passed by the majority for the control of the minority. And out went prohibition. We would sell liquor as every civilized country does. We would make it legal. But repeal went through tongue-in-cheek. Each state was left to set up its own liquor commission and pass its own laws in addition to those of the federal government. And what an absurd, contradictory mess we have. One state, Mississippi, is still legally dry, but millions of dollars are collected in black market taxes on the liquor sold there. In some states, you can buy it, but only for home use. In others, you can buy it by the bottle, but not by the drink. In 16 states, you can buy it in a state-owned store, but in 5 of these, only if you have a license to buy. There are regulations about everything from prices to the number of stores allowed, from whether you must be sitting or standing to buy a drink to the penalties for drunkenness. To make it even more ridiculous, some states leave the whole thing up to the individual county. I know of one restaurant on a county line that sells whiskey in one part, but not in the other. All this is bad enough, but when you get into liquor advertising, there are enough do's and don'ts to drive even an ad man crazy. Here's just an example. Suppose you have a newspaper ad approved to run throughout the country, subject to local regulations. Are there any? Damn right there are. 50 sets of almost entirely different ones. In some states, you may put in a picture of the bottle. Some states insist you take it out. In some, you may put in the price. Others say keep it out. Some do not permit even a reference to price, either direct or indirect. They don't agree on what you can use for illustrations, whether you can use endorsements, mention holidays or famous characters, run a contest, offer premiums, or even on the size of type you can use. The advertiser pays dearly for all this. Not only does it cost him a lot of money to reset the ad each time, one company needed 27 different versions of the same ad, but often all the ads are weakened. Have they found a way to overcome this? Sure. Use magazines instead of newspapers. If a magazine ad is approved to run in the United States, no one can stop it from running in any one state, even if that state doesn't permit the sale of liquor. So the newspapers have lost. Magazine advertising by distillers went up $12 million from 1955 to 1961, while their newspaper advertising increased by only $3 million. Now, a committee is trying to straighten out the advertising regulations so that the state and federal governments can agree on one policy. This should go through, but somehow I doubt very much that it will. Each commission has an axe to grind, and they'll grind them and use them. I could tell them one way to improve matters. Take the tongue out of the cheek. Throw the state commission laws out, and with them, those holier-than-thou groups that meddle in your personal life. In New York, the liquor law was recently changed, but, as usual, in a pussyfooting way. Here's what was ruled on price advertising. No licensee authorized to sell beer or liquor at retail for consumption off the premises shall display any sign on or adjacent to the licensed premises, setting forth the price at which beer or liquor, or any brand thereof, is sold or offered for sale, or advertise such price in any other manner or by any other means, except in the interior of the licensed premises. But that's not all. We hear from Albany that this provision was passed solely to protect the small retailer from the big operators. Isn't that nice? It's like saying we'll stop Macy's from advertising prices on dresses because they sell too cheaply, and we'll hurt the little fellow who sells for more. Poor little dealer, or poor little customer. It's all a question of whether you're buying or selling. Treat liquor like any other product. Make it subject to the same regulations as everything else, whether it's razor blades or watches. Make it a part of the competitive business community. Let's have respect for the men in the liquor business. They know right from wrong as well as anybody else, and they should be on their own. There is a safety valve. If they chisel, haul them up before the Federal Trade Commission. That's what it's there for. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to check our link in the description, where you'll find many other fundamental marketing books in different languages. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more persuasion and direct response content. See you in the next one.